Okay, so thank you to all of you for joining me today. Just to run through a few housekeeping points before we do get started. So we've allowed 60 minutes for this session, and as I've mentioned, we want to keep it as interactive as possible. So we do have a few breakout rooms. There's a Q&A at the end. So I'll make sure to leave enough time for a nice bit of a Q&A because we want to be able to keep this as kind of discussion focused as possible. Please do use the chat box, which you should find in the toolbar on your screen in order to ask any questions. Alternatively, you can raise a virtual hand and I will get round to you and I'll get round to as many people as I can. The session is being recorded. We can share this with you so you can share it with your team members that you think will benefit as well. If you don't want to feature in the recording, then please do keep your camera off and also keep those mics off to minimize any background noise. If you have any issues with your internet connection, the best thing to do is to leave the room and then use the registration email to kind of join back into the live room. That should bring you straight back in. If you've missed any content or you need a bit of a catch up, pop something into the chat box and I'll bring you back up to speed. In terms of the view, I'm hoping you can kind of see myself or whoever is speaking and then the full slide. But if you do have any issues, then you can always choose side by side speaker view, which should help with all of that. So one of the things that we know clubs and organisations struggle with, and this is across all sectors, but primarily within that obviously not-for-profit sector, which so many clubs and organisations that are physical activity, and sports focused tend to be, quite often they're set up in a cask situation, or maybe they're a CIC, or it could be that they're a charity. And what can happen is actually if they are focused on just purely running off of grants that they might be used to applying for, or it might be that they have kind of a minimal income stream diversion that can actually really limit their sustainability and limit their long-term viability. At the moment, I think all of us would agree that the funding landscape is quite narrow, it's quite small, and it's highly competitive. So what we're looking at in response to this in 2025 is how can organizations look to diversify those income streams. So it might be that actually they start thinking about how do they look at their membership, their revenue, maybe they start developing merchandise that they can sell. All these kind of different things can develop an income stream. What we're going to be talking about today is how crowdfunding and match funding in particular can actually be one of those kind of revenue or income generating streams throughout the course of the year for a club, and also the different ways in which clubs can and organizations can utilize a platform like crowdfunding in order to actually replicate some of that fundraising over the period of maybe 12 months. So why is it important for organizations to diversify those income streams? Well, having all of your eggs in one basket, it can be quite a financial risk. So if you're only relying on one income stream to actually keep your club sustainable or your organization sustainable, if that goes away, suddenly you're in you're in financial crisis. So actually it can reduce financial risk by spreading those kind of income generation activities across a variety of different income streams. That can lead to increasing that financial stability, which of course is really important for longevity. It can unlock new opportunities. So just the process of actually going out and testing the water with these different opportunities can help to build partnerships and open and unlock the door to future opportunity as well. Can help the organizations and those clubs to expand their reach and influence. It might get them connecting with different audiences and different networks. It's going to enhance their long-term sustainability. So we're not thinking just short-term here. Of course, there's always going to be potential short-term financial needs for clubs and organizations, whether that's running a specific program of delivery, whether that's upgrading facilities, or in response to, we've just had horrendous weather, haven't we? And there's been flooding in different areas of the UK. And maybe it's a response to that they've got a financial need which is imminent to repair flood damage or storm damage. What organisations need to be looking at as well is how do they enhance that long-term sustainability? How can they improve that flexibility and adaptability as well as an organization to be able to look at the landscape of income and of grants and be able to be adaptable within that? It can help to strengthen donor engagement. So when it comes to people actually giving and donating to clubs and organizations and charities, it's ways in which you can make that exciting and keep it fresh. And there are different ways you can do that even within our platform, and can drive innovation as well. So it can really help to have a fresh pairs of eyes on the situation, to enlist the help of the wider committee for organisations and clubs as well, and maybe give people the opportunity to actually start thinking about these different ways in which they can take ownership and start helping the club to strive forward as well. Which brings me nicely to crowdfunding. So, for some of you on the call today, you'll be really familiar with crowdfunding as a concept. You'll probably be working with clubs and organizations. You may have already yourself used a crowdfunding platform, whether it's ours, Crowdfunder UK, or whether it's the others that are out there, where you might have done some fundraising for charity, or it might be the club or organization already uses crowdfunding as a principle, which is brilliant. Crowdfunder UK, which is obviously ourselves, we've been around for about 13 years or so now, and we are the UK's leading rewards-based crowdfunding platform. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this, rewards-based crowdfunding is where you have the opportunity to offer a benefit of some kind in return for a financial contribution. We're not asking people to give away shares or equity in their club or their organisation. What we're saying is there anything that you could have as a way of saying thank you? So that might be as simple as a social media shout out. It could be a team building day at the club. It could be merchandise. It could be products and services that have been sourced from the local business community as well. So a great example of this is the Burlish Bike Park. And they offered things that had a real appeal to their core audience. So they're building a bike park. They've got downhill mountain bikers who are, their core audience, then immediate network. So they will have things like mountain biking sessions. They will have workshops and tutorials, bike focused stickers, all those kinds of things that will go down really well with their core audience. Also, they offered things like garden centre vouchers or money off a photo shoot. That's where they've gone out to their local community and kind of drummed up support by way of these gifts of rewards that they can offer onto their page. And therefore, the wider community that think that the bike park's a great idea, but actually don't, mountain bike themselves, might think, well, actually, I was going to get a family photo shoot booked anyway. Now I can get 25% off that if I donate to this crowdfunding page. So it's a lovely way to have some collaborative promotion. The crowdfunding campaign and the project essentially promotes the local businesses. The local businesses promote the crowdfunding campaign, and it becomes a collaborative community effort. And that's what we really, really champion here at Crowdfunder is how do you get communities and organizations within that working together to have lasting impact for those that benefit within the community. And sports organisations, sports clubs, charities that focus on physical activity, all have a really strong key part to play in bringing communities together and developing that impact. So it works incredibly well. Just some numbers before we go into a little bit of a task for you all. So the story so far, Crowdfunder UK has supported projects to raise around £355 million collectively. We see around 300 different projects adding per day, and that's across the UK and that's across all different sectors as well. So that's sports, community, charities, businesses, individuals, all sorts of things can be crowdfunded for. And we work with a whole host of national and regional partners in order to distribute what we call extra funding, is essentially match funding. So where organisations have a pot of money to distribute to eligible projects, we become are the kind of the conduits to actually distribute that to those eligible projects. So we've managed to distribute just over £35 million as well in extra funding. Now, when it comes to the sports sector or the physical activity sector, we've seen more than 7,000 projects come and crowdfund using our platform, and they've been supported by more than 551,000 supporters. So that's individuals within their networks and their communities. They have raised collectively £39.5 million. And in terms of extra funding distributed to those clubs, those eligible organisations, this is just from our sporting partners. So that would be Sport England, Sport Wales, Sport Northern Ireland, and we have worked with British Cycling in the past as well. Just those handful of partners have distributed £11.3 million to those projects. So that's not including the local authorities that we work with or the large organisations that don't fit within that kind of sports sector partnership. So a really great opportunity for organisations and clubs to really amplify their fundraising by coming on board with us and actually applying for and hopefully being approved for some of these match funds as well. Now, one thing that kind of does fly under the radar a little bit when people are thinking about raising money is all of the additional benefits that might come along with doing that in this way. So one thing that we've noticed and that we do get a lot of feedback from clubs and organisations is these things that they don't necessarily take into account when they're just looking to kind of raise those funds initially. And if you imagine, you're filling in your traditional grant applications, you might get a rejection, you might have no feedback, you might obviously be lucky to get that money, and then a lot of it happens behind closed doors. And it's a lot of work, don't get me wrong. All of this, raising money for any organisation, is a lot of work. But the nice thing about doing it in such a kind of public way, if you like, is that you get all of these great things. It's not just somebody kind of sat at a desk, maybe another rejection coming through and feeling a little bit deflated. It's a brilliant way to get lots of additional things come your way too. So first of all is validation. It's a great way to test the water and actually see if there is an appetite for what you're doing. So it can help build confidence with those that are hoping to deliver the project, and make sure that obviously the crowd, which is the network or the community, get excited and hoping and hopeful for the project to come to fruition as well. It'll build awareness around the project and the organisation delivering it, and can create that buzz, getting people kind of excited, as I've mentioned, and also get the organisation noticed potentially by a wider audience. We are really encouraging people to kind of push themselves out of their comfort zone a little bit. Don't just look inward towards their beneficiaries or their members, but to actually think about that wider community as a whole, and how do they connect with and engage with those people too. And that can help to build membership of the club, the awareness of the organisation. Everybody that does support a crowdfunding campaign will become an advocate. They will start talking about the crowdfunder, the project that's going to come to fruition, the organisation that's running it. And those advocates can be a really, really great way to naturally build upon that audience. And it can help to create some really meaningful connections going forward as well, whether that's from a member of the business community that supported the project with a reward. Maybe that's somebody who's decided they'd love to come and volunteer with the club. There's all sorts of ways that people can be advocates and then actually get involved with the delivery and with the organisation itself. Now, for lots of people, it will definitely require potentially some new skills. It does require some hard work. However, when people are committed to kind of taking on these new skills and putting in the time and the energy to do it, they will find that a lot of these are transferable and they can really help to benefit the organisation going forward as well. So that might be things like effectively creating an engaging story, or social media promotion, marketing, networking skills. All of these things can be really vital to help that longevity of an organisation, help them be sustainable, and to keep looking into different ways to diversify those income streams as well. A lot of that takes the skills that crowdfunding does. And of course, that match funding or extra funding that I've mentioned as well. That's a huge draw to crowdfunding in this way with us. Just very quickly, the way that it works, for those that aren't familiar, is you would essentially encourage clubs and organisations to come along and set up an account on Crowdfunder UK. That's a free to access account. You also have access to all of the resources, the educational resources that we have, the guides to help you do this effectively and successfully. The project owners, so the clubs or organisations in this instance, would set a target. How much do they need to get this project off the ground? How much do they need to deliver what they're hoping to? And how long that they would need to do that? They would then go on to add any rewards that they might have sourced from their community, and they would also apply for any extra funding that they've been matched with. So our computer system will match organisations or projects with any eligible partner funds that we think would be a good fit. And that's done through knowing where they are in the country and their project aims and the setup of their organisation as well. They would then go on to launch their project. And the idea is that they will have complete control of how they then promote their project page to their audience. It's a slight misconception that once a project goes live on the website, suddenly the magical funding fairies come along and put lots of money onto the page. It would be wonderful if that was the case. However, unfortunately, it does come down to the individuals behind the project actually pushing it out to their audience. And that in itself can be really rewarding when they do the legwork and when they start doing that promotion and they see those donations come in. It's a really great boost for their confidence to let them know, you can do this. It does take a bit of hard work, but the fruit's in the labor and you're actually doing it. So we always encourage people to plan effectively. And where you come in is that you can encourage them to kind of not only plan, to use the resources on hand, but also to take ownership of that promotion and to do that in varied ways, which we'll talk about. Okay, so that leads us to our first breakout session. What would be lovely is if you could take a look at our explore page, which I will put into the chat box for you now, and just have a little look and see what organizations are kind of crowdfunding around you. So you can search by location, you can also search by keyword, or you might want to choose the category. So you might want to choose sport, for example, or you might want to search for your particular sector sport. I always like to look at successful projects because it's good to get an idea of how they've done this. If you want to look at unsuccessful as well to compare the two, that can also be super useful. So I'm going to pause the recording. Extra funding is a really big USP for us here at Crowdfunder. It can be a real draw for a lot of organisations, especially that work in a kind of not-for-profit or a profit with purpose, we like to call it, way. And quite often that is organisations within, as I've mentioned, the community and the sports sector, physical activity sector as well. So the way in which organisations or projects would be matched with any of our funding partners is by filling in the basic information when they start to put their project page together. So they will be asked whereabouts in the country they are. They'll be asked some basic questions regarding their project. So who's likely to benefit? What are the potential project outcomes? And what are they looking to achieve, essentially? Now, that is a really straightforward tick box exercise. We'll also need them to let us know their organisational structure. And again, that is selected from a drop-down kind of box where they can pick one of the organisational structures that we have. All of that information will help our computer system to match them as accurately as possible with our funding partners. And we do have quite a few of them. And that might be based on purely where they are in the country. And it could be maybe a local authority that's looking to support local projects. It could be someone like Sport England for the Movements Fund, for example. They would then go on to fill in a straightforward application form through their crowdfunding page, so through their project dashboard. And unlike kind of major grant applications, some of these applications can take around 10 to 15 minutes at the most. The idea is for projects to take a look at these questions within the application. it might be worth them then having a conversation with committee members or a board of directors, whoever really is in control of the project overall, make sure they're aligning. And they can always create a document with those answers on and kind of copy and paste them into any of the funding applications that they want to use. They can apply for more than one fund. I should make that really clear as well. So they could have been matched with Sport England as well as their local authority, and they can apply for both pots of money. And if they are approved, they may well receive both pledges, one from Sport England, one from a local authority, for example. So they can kind of stack up the extra funding. So it can really, really help to boost the amount that they're raising and amplify that crowd support. So if every donation that's being made by a member of the community is then being matched by multiple kind of funding partners, that's a really exciting message. Just a quick look at the Movement Fund specifically. So this is newly launched last year, and we are distributing that with our partners Sport England. There is £15,000 available maximum per project, and that can be up to 50% of a project's target. So that's their crowdfunding project target. There are a couple of routes to applying for this one. I'm just going to speak about applying through Crowdfunder, because obviously that's mainly what we're doing at the moment. However, people can also contact Sport England directly, and they will be triaged by Sport England and potentially brought back into the crowdfunding world as well. For the purpose of today's session, we are talking about projects that you are signposting to us at Crowdfunder, and we can then kind of triage them from that stage and help them to create projects, crowdfund, and access all of the match funding opportunities as well. Just to highlight some of the other funds. So as I've mentioned, you can stack up or piggyback match funding for a project, and there's loads of different opportunities available out there. Some focusing more on environmental projects, some on financial well-being, some on sport specifically, and some which have a broad eligibility criteria as well. So it's always worth organisations and clubs having a look at the extra funding page to see what might be available for them. And that leads us to our next breakout room, where I am going to share that page with you. And it would be great for you to have a quick little look and just to see for your area and for your sector, what funds may be available for a project if you were to set up a project for something that's close to your heart. Okay, so one of the questions that does come up frequently is why do people pledge? Why would people pledge to a crowdfunding campaign as opposed to just maybe straight donations via a website or via a kind of a different funding platform where it's kind of donations only? Or, you know, what is it that makes people want to donate to a crowdfunding page? And there are two really strong notions. One is that they believe in the idea, and they have maybe they have a connection at a personal or professional level with either the sector, the organisation, the individuals behind it, or the idea that's going to impact their community. They might benefit from it, or they might just see the benefit of it and think it's a great idea. And then also there's those rewards that we mentioned. There is a really solid group of people within that community that will think the idea is great, but the thing that's made them kind of part with their money and actually donate is they've spotted something that's in that reward list that either they wanted, needed, are treating themselves to. So having the ability to offer those rewards can be a really great driver to not only connect with a wider audience, but also incentivize that giving too. The key to a successful crowdfunding campaign is understanding the community network around you. So this is something that we go over with the potential project owners. It's something that would be great for yourselves to kind of be aware of as well, that it is about knowing who your audience are and how you connect with those people. So somebody who is already engaging with the organisation, they're already maybe coming along and practicing the sport, they are going to have a different connection to the potential project than somebody who has never played the sport, doesn't know the organisation. So how do project owners communicate effectively with all of these different groups? And it is all about storytelling. It's about finding that hook which resonates with each of these different groups of people and using that as their lead into those conversations. So it might be that actually there's a wonderful reward, which is, let's just say it's discounted membership. That's going to be the kind of the leading narrative when things go out in the club WhatsApp groups or onto the club Facebook page. And also the benefits of the project itself. Look what we're doing, you guys are going to benefit from this. However, it might be that when you speak to local schools and local organizations like that, it could be a, will you fundraise for us? We've got this great fundraising challenge and we'd love for your school to be a part of it. It could be a great way to get the kids active, and we'll come along and we'll help host this day where everyone's going to fundraise. It could be that you're speaking to the business community and your kind of lead in with that conversation is, we would love to be able to promote your business. This is what we're doing. If you could offer a reward for our page, then we will pin your organization or your business to the top of our social media pages for a week. We're going to shout about how great you are. We'll tag you in all of our promotion. Hopefully that's going to drum up some new custom for you. And if you promote us as well, then that's going to mutually benefit both organizations. So it's understanding the network, understanding how to communicate, whether that's face to face, emails, WhatsApp or Messenger. It could be featuring at networking events, getting out there and hosting community days. There are all sorts of different ways to communicate with people, and it's understanding which one works best for which group of people. A blanket email to everybody within these different bubbles of a community will not yield as much engagement as thinking about friends and family. I'm going to pick up the phone. Community organizations and local schools, I might actually go in there and speak to the head, the management staff, or I've got friends at that school that can put something into the parents' WhatsApp groups. So think about how to kind of infiltrate those networks, if you like, effectively. And everyone can help a project do this. So ultimately, you'd have a project leader. They would be the person who's put their name forward and would be the contact for the page. So Crowdfunder UK, they'd sign up and have their own details on there. And then when it comes to building that community of people around them, it will be looking at who in the community can make a donation, who could maybe share that project out to their networks, who might be able to offer a reward in order to boost those donations or incentivize those donations, and who might be able to become a crowdfunder champion. And that might be somebody who's got a large social media reach or who is just well known within the community. When it comes to the team of people behind running the project, it's great to do it collaboratively. So when you're speaking with organizations, try and encourage them to get others to help them with this, whether it's helping to network, create the page, maybe somebody who's brilliant at taking pictures or maybe creating a short video. And then somebody who's just well versed with social media is always really, really helpful. And quite often there will be people within organizations or committees or club members who can do all of these things. Doesn't have to be professionally. They can just be talented. So calls to action in the lead up to running a crowdfunding campaign can be really effective, and it can help get people excited about what's coming as well. So this is the important part about today. How can you help? So by attending sessions like this and kind of upskilling yourselves and just being aware of what's out there in terms of how clubs and organizations could raise money, that's taking the first step. All we're asking you to do really is to signpost people to us. We can help them from that point on, but knowing what we do, knowing what's available, and signposting people towards the available match funding and towards Crowdfunder UK. Having the knowledge. So if you've ever run a crowdfunder, you might have, which is brilliant. If you've got clubs and organizations within your area that you know of that have done this, go and speak to them, drop them an email, get as much information as you can. Come along to our webinars as well, where we talk through how to do this effectively. We run different train the trainer sessions throughout the year. Some are more in depth with the actual kind of mechanics of how to do this. So you can really, really build upon that knowledge if you want to as well. And the best thing to do is run a dummy project. Sign yourself up and start putting the information in for your kind of dream project. And understand what it's like from a project owner's perspective, sorry, that's going to really help you in imparting that knowledge. If you, as an organization, have any funding that you might offer, so you might offer grants within your sector and people might apply to you directly, that is amazing. Is there a way that you could maximize or, amplify that funding by turning it into a match fund and actually encouraging people to raise money from their community as well and reap all of those benefits that I talked about at the beginning? Offering your support is wonderful. So it can be a challenging journey for some. It does involve a fair amount of work, and just being there to kind of encourage them and let them know that, it does take a bit of work. You will need to self-promote this, but it's going to be worth it in the end when all of this comes to fruition. And knowing where to signpost them for that additional support in terms of the skills that they might need in order to do this effectively. And then, of course, sharing their project if you can do so on a personal or professional level. We don't recommend that you do all of the promotion, but if you can reshare something, if you as an NGB, for example, have been tagged in some of the promotion, can you reshare that? Can you do a bit of a feature shout out to any of the organisations within your sector that are currently crowdfunding? That can be massive for an organisation. Things that we would encourage you not to do is to create a project page for them, unless, of course, it's something that you are personally involved in. The project owners, so the clubs and the organisations, know their projects, know their organisation inside out. They're the ones that can create that page with passion. They can tell their story in a way that is really hard to do from the outside. So encourage them to do that and lean upon those around them to help them. Don't do all of the marketing for them, as I've just mentioned, but do, of course, reshare if you can. Please don't promise that they're going to get funded. Obviously, with match funding, it's an application process. If they're eligible, they could well be approved, which is wonderful. If they are raising money in general, there will be targets involved. There are different ways in which they can raise that money. I won't go into all of that now, but if they've chosen a structure where they need to hit their target to be successful, then what you don't want to do is promise them that's going to happen. Encourage them, but don't make promises just in case they fall short of that target, for example. Don't accept any responsibility for a project not getting funded. You're there to kind of support, mentor, signpost. And then, unless again you're personally involved, try not to assist with that campaign delivery post funding. It's very much the responsibility of the organisation or club to do these things. And actually, we want to empower them to be able to do those things as well. The more they can do themselves, the better of an experience this will be for them and something that they can then replicate in the future as well. And we have a huge amount of learning and support resources available. We have free to access webinars aimed at project owners, potential project owners, and how they can do this successfully. We have a knowledge hub full of wonderful resources, a real life customer support team, email support and advice. When you sign up for Crowdfunder, you'll receive tailored email advice dependent on your sector. A help centre written by the real people in the customer service team as well. And then that live project dashboard, which is really helpful. And they can get a whole wealth of data and analytics from there too. Okay. Thank you so much for bearing with me with those slides. I know it's a huge amount of content, but we've got such a varied group today that I wanted to make sure I kind of covered everything really. We've got time now for a bit of a Q&A session, so please do pop anything into the chat box, or if you're feeling brave, you can just pop up a hand or give me a shout out and we'll go through some of the questions before we get to the top of the hour. Okay, so in terms of slides, so yeah, absolutely. I can share the slides with you. We will share the recording as well. And by all means, share that with your team members. In terms of the content of today's session, it's kind of very much looking at what can organisations at an active partnership or an NGB kind of level be doing to be able to signpost and support projects. Our monthly webinars that we host are looking at project owner and project level and how do you actually do the mechanics of crowdfunding. So just bear that in mind when you're thinking about who to share it with. Patrick, great question. Are new match funds being added all the time? We have a wonderful team working away in the background who are contacting and brokering different partnerships with different match funding opportunities. So yes, we do have new match funds that do get added. We have some that kind of go away for a little bit once the pot of money has been spent and then come back with us when they've got some more money to distribute as well. So do encourage people to always keep an eye on that extra funding page, because you never know, something might be launching soon, and we will shout about it as an organisation when we do launch a new fund as well. Okay, great one from Carla. Is there a certain time that you would advise the crowdfunder stays open for? It's up to the project owners, really. In terms of kind of general crowdfunding advice, we used to always say kind of 6 to 8 weeks was an optimum amount of time to run a crowdfunding campaign. It should, in theory, be a bit of a short, sharp kind of injection of fundraising. However, what we have found over the last kind of year to 18 months is that people are running them for slightly longer and actually using it as a way to generate donations for a longer period of time. So it might be that they've got a slightly bigger fundraising window that they're trying to raise maybe a little bit more money. The other thing that you can do is run a relatively short crowdfunding campaign, and you might have to do that dependent on what the T's and C's are for a particular fund. They might only have a short funding window, for example, that they will match fund within. So that's something to bear in mind. Each fund is different. But you can always do something which is called an always on. So actually you might run a 6-week campaign, give it everything for 6 weeks, really engage an audience, raise your target amount, and then actually once you close in inverted commas and you receive the payout of the money that you've raised, your project would switch to something we call always on, and it means that people can continue to donate to that page. So that might just sit nicely kind of in the background, amassing donations without it being this kind of big push for the fundraiser. So there are different ways to utilize the platform. And it will vary dependent on what the fundraising need is. You know, what's the time frame of when the funds need to be raised and need to be drawn down, and the organization and their commitment and their needs in terms of how much they can put into the crowdfunder over what duration of time. So it's all quite flexible, and it is definitely in the hands of the project owners to decide to a certain degree, dependent, as I mentioned, on potential T's and C's with some of the funds. Let me just scroll back through the chat box and see if we've got any more questions. Can Crowdfunder help amplify the request, or is this down to the database that the organization holds? Oh, in terms of, is that the reach of a club, for example? So in terms of like a network, is my understanding. Natasha, pop something in the chat box if I've misunderstood that. In terms of promotion, it's very much down to the project. However, as I just mentioned with yourselves and the organizations you represent, kind of resharing and maybe, you know, doing a little bit of a shout out to people who are crowdfunding within your sector, which can be really, really useful and beneficial. If those projects are promoting their pages and also tagging in Crowdfunder, maybe tagging in their NGB or their local authority or whoever has, you know, supported them with match funding as well. Those will obviously then be on the radar of those bigger organizations when it comes to social media. And we will do our best to reshare and re-promote wherever we can. But 300 projects a day coming through is quite a lot to kind of constantly be shouting about ourselves. But if something's getting traction and they are tagging in Crowdfunder, then absolutely there will be people within our content and social media team that have got eyes on that and that will be resharing as best they can as well. Okay, does the extra funding support from Sport England have a closing date? Great question. Not at the moment, no. It will be a case of with the majority of our funds, unless there is a real clear end date on the fund page, it will be a case of when the money's run out. And the Sport England Movement Fund has recently launched. There's a good chunk of money in there, so it's going to be with us for a while. Before the movement fund, we had Active Together and Places and Spaces with Sport England. So, it's a historical partnership that we've been working with them now for 4 years, and there's a decent amount of money there to distribute. So, no end date at the moment. Okay, I'll just do one more question. So how much, oh, this is brilliant. Well done, Sarah. Great question. How much involvement do you or the funders have with the projects once the funds have been received in terms of seeing what the projects have delivered, i.e., is how the project have spent their money on what they've said, and done what they've delivered? Okay, so if I start with Crowdfunder, we very much put the transparency, if you like, of what you're spending the money on. We kind of put that in the project's hands and also the supporters' hands. So if a project ends up spending the money not in the way they intended, the supporters will probably call them out on it, depending on what that is. What we ask from a project owner is transparency. Sometimes things happen, don't they? Sometimes maybe it's facility upgrades. Maybe that gets postponed for a while because of unforeseen circumstances, or because actually it's going to cost more money, or whatever the reasons might be. What project owners can do is go back onto their page and actually post an update and say, this is where we're at with it. This is what's happening. We won't be going to projects and checking up on what the money's been spent on. I guarantee the community will. If the project owner's suddenly gone on holiday for 6 months and bought themselves a new car, and actually the club hasn't been developed, it's one of those tricky ones. However, with our funding partners, there will be an eligibility, and there will be things that are being funded specifically. Quite a lot of that is unrestricted in a way. However, again, transparency. All of our funding partners are very personable, and all it really takes is that communication. So again, if there's a delay, or if maybe there's a slight deviation from the original plan, as long as it's still eligible, the chances are it will be okay. However, those projects do need to communicate with the funding partners. There will be things like impact surveys that need to be completed, kind of maybe 3-6 months down the line. And that's really just collating that kind of information for the funders. Was the money you received impactful? How has that benefited versus what you said you were going to do? So yeah, there is a little bit of surveying, there is a little bit of feedback. However, there is a lot of autonomy, I guess, put onto the project owners as to having the honesty and the transparency to be able to say, yes, this is what the money is being spent on, and this is how we've done it. And actually that can just help to really show their communities as well what they've done. It's something to celebrate, isn't it? I hope that answered that question. I went on a bit of a tangent, but by all means, we can go over that at a separate time if needs be. I have just noticed that we've run over ever so slightly. So what I'm going to do is just share our last slide for you, if I may, which has just got our contact details on there for you, and how to kind of keep in touch with us on socials as well. So for those of you that might want to talk about any pots of money that you might have, that you might want to think about, creating a match fund, which could be an exciting thing for you to do as an organisation, you can contact our partnerships team. For any queries and questions generally about crowdfunding, you can contact our support team, and they will make sure that they triage your inquiry to the best team member, and then keeping in touch with us on socials as well. Let's follow each other and keep in touch and make sure we're all up to speed with what's going on in the exciting world of projects and communities raising money. I'm hoping that today's been of benefit to you. Please do stay in touch. We'd love to see you supporting projects within your sector, and signposting them to us to see how we can help support them as well to raise money and get them sustainable and impacting their communities. Thank you so much. Take care.